The issue here is something that myself and others have been calling on the government to do something about. And by the way, this is happening all over the Western world, with countries taking much tougher action than we are. And that is the existence of these ridiculous Chinese, so-called Chinese police stations. We believe there are three in the United Kingdom, two in the London area, including this Croydon one, and also one up in Glasgow. And the reality is that in other countries, America is now arresting people involved in this. I'm told that in Holland, they've now decided they have to eradicate them. Spain is now talking about doing the same. Everywhere you go, they're beginning now at last, finally, after a lot of going on, see them as a threat. The problem over in the UK is the government itself seems ambivalent to the whole idea of what's going on. What they do is they haul people in who are Chinese people who have over here, come here for various reasons, maybe fled Hong Kong or whatever. And then quite often they then link to police stations, proper police stations back in China, where the families of these individuals are then paraded in front of them, and veiled threats are made about if they don't come back, if they don't recant, if all that. Otherwise, the families themselves will find life more difficult. This goes on endlessly, and we seem not to care about it. They're not under diplomatic passports, these people. And in fact, they could be kicked out tomorrow, but nothing is being done about it.
When you raise this, which I'm sure you do, what answers do you get back about why no one's doing anything about it?
You get no answers at all, to be quite frank with you. You get a lot of obfuscation and flannel. And the reality is that there is no other way but to close these damn places down and kick these people out. It comes on the back, I'm afraid, of a weak response to the Manchester incident, where, of course, the Chinese consulate dragged a peaceful protester outside the embassy into their compound and then beat that person up. I mean, viciously. There's video footage of it completely.
Yeah.
And we called on the government just to simply say, right, kick them out like you can do because they're under diplomatic passports. The government said, no, they have a police investigation. And this dragged on and on and on. Eventually, they were taken out quietly by the Chinese government. But the whole thing is that we seem, and I see there's a speech today or something from the foreign secretary.
Yes, going to get to that.
Yeah. Ambivalent policy of ours at the moment, which is we're going to show China robust pragmatism. If you can tell me what the hell that means, I don't know.
Well, I can't. But I'm just reading his interview, James Cleverly's interview. China is big, it's influential, it's important, it has a huge technological heft. That's all true. It has an incredibly important role to play in environmental issues, economic issues. And so we have got to, and therefore we will, engage closely and regularly with China, because it'd be really, really counterproductive not to do so. I was going to say that can both be true. Can you engage closely and regularly with China on the important issues while at the same time raising concerns about these kind of secret police stations? But maybe it's not.
Well, there's no evidence that it is happening like that. The only evidence I've got, and I hate to say this because I want the British government to be strong, is that we are lagging behind many of our partner nations. I mean, I was ashamed of President Macron's recent comments about Taiwan, kowtowing to the Chinese government while he was over there. Now his dreadful intervention or attempted intervention in the war in Ukraine. But when the UK government's line seems to me at the moment to be very different, and I'm sorry, I don't agree with it. It's basically saying, look, we need the trade. We desperately need all their investments. And yet China itself is undermining whole institutions in the United Kingdom. Just yesterday, I was talking to IP, intellectual property lawyers, to tell me that the China now is flooding the UK. Flooding it is not an overstatement. Flooding the UK with false applications for IP, intellectual property rights, for registrations with the IPO. Now, this is huge numbers of them coming in. Why are they doing this? They're doing it, I think, to mess up Western systems. They've been doing it in America, but the Americans are cracking down now. You have to have a place of business, a proper place of business. Some of them are registered, thousands of supposed offices in one small semi-detached house, and yet we do nothing about it. Our universities are being absolutely flooded with Chinese money, which stops them being in any way critical of the Chinese government. They have Chinese students that are being spied on by the Confucius Institute and other organizations, and still we go on. And we found we found people who have been in UK universities, who had been in Chinese security universities, now on defense contracts. I mean, we are ludicrously open to Chinese abuse. Many of us have been calling out this. Other countries are in advance of that, not just America, countries in Europe as well. So it's time we woke up to this threat.
Yeah, I mean, you sound very frustrated about it, and I know you've been warning about this stuff for some time. What do you think it's actually going to take? Presumably, it's going to take something, whatever that might be, to happen for, in your opinion, the government to do something about it. Do you know what that might be?
Well, I keep thinking there is something happening and going to happen, and it's obvious. The beating up of the student was of the protester was one, but nothing happened. We've evidenced huge influence in the universities. Nothing happens. We've talked about these Chinese police stations. We've shown evidence of how they've been operating, how the other governments in the rest of the world now are rapidly waking up to this and cracking down. But even the Prime Minister's own statement when he was standing for election was that he saw China as a systemic threat. Since then, they've taken the word threat out. I gather in today's speech, he's going to talk about you can't call them a threat because it's all too nuanced for that. Our problem is, we've got to be very careful. China laughs behind its hand at our attempts to sound strong, but at the same time, not strong and not robust. The old Project Kowtow seems to be in full action. The kowtow, by the way, for those who listen who may or may not know, is when Chinese officials will drop to their knees and put their heads on the ground in supplication to the emperor. That is a physical fact. And I simply think sometimes we veer towards business as being so important to us that we're prepared to turn over. China's committing genocide, the eradication of an ethnic group in Xinjiang, the Uyghur Muslims. It's putting them into forced labor, including Tibetans. It's cracking down on Christian churches. It's invaded the South China Seas against the UN's statements, and it's threatening Taiwan constantly. There is a limit to how much you're prepared to let a nation like this go on.
Okay.
In the 1930s, we learned some lessons, didn't we?
Well.